My name is Andy England. I'm from Los Angeles, and I am predominantly a painter and mixed media artist. So I really like the way that painting allows me to communicate in a different way than I would normally, certainly would have done before I ever thought about art in general. But by making a painting and putting that on social media or putting that in a gallery or putting it on my website and having tons of people see it, um, they they may have that conversation with the painting, and I can have that statement even if I'm not there, and I can have that statement like in an instant without having to say, okay, hold on, hear me out, and then have to like explain something. Um, it's sort of different with the paintings versus the mixed media stuff, where with the paintings, the statements appear to be a little bit more on the social side, whereas the mixed media seems to be more on the political side. There's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot going on in our country. There's a lot going on politically, all over the place. So it's hard not to have an opinion one way or the other. And so with that, it's also difficult to voice, like literally like voice that opinion. A lot of people don't want to hear another person's opinion. A lot of people don't want to voice their own opinion. And in certain circumstances, certain opinions like they're very unwelcome, um, and could lead to consequences, right? So it's really an interesting way to look at it, where you can make a painting and you can have that conversation without like vocally articulating any particular statement, making a lot more mixed media work for that reason, because I think it's a lot easier to have conversations um, through images than it is to have conversations vocally. And it's also a lot easier to reach a broader audience through art for me in terms of painting. They're inspired by everyday life in Los Angeles. I create these idealized images. Feelings that a lot of people say that they bring up are things like nostalgia and loneliness. I don't necessarily uh, try to convey anything sad, but I do have this overall frustration in certain aspects of life, and it's hard for me to communicate that. Um, I have like a piece called "No Access," it's sort of a statement about when you go to some of these kind of nicer neighborhoods, but then you kind of start to get this vibe that you're not welcome there. You can't park there. There's no parking anywhere. You aren't really able, it's like a lot of one-way streets. You can't really maneuver very well. They don't have like very easily accessed front doors, or sometimes you don't even know where the door is. Like that kind of idea crops up in a lot of places. And so that's one that I've had that conversation with quite a few times with that piece specifically. Um, and people get it right away. The piece that I have at Let Me Cake, I made that painting, um, which was called Nostalgia. And I did in fact take the bite that you see in the image, and I did take that sip of soda. I don't drink soda, but I did take that little sip of soda. And I have to say that previously I would have eaten the entire box of those cupcakes, and I would have, drank the whole soda. Um, but it was so disgusting. It was so gross. I could not eat it. I mean, it's after you've been away from it, like you just don't have a taste for it anymore. I previously had not just a sweet tooth, but a serious, serious problem with sugar. No question, I would say an addiction. I could buy every cake and cupcake and pie on that rack, and everything in my fridge and freezer was just cakes and cupcakes and pies. And at the end of every meal, it was not complete. The meal was not complete unless I ate a cake. I worked really hard. It took forever, but I finally got over it. And then I, quit eating all of that stuff. And now I'm better at kind of just tempering it. Um, so it was so weird how it was like a very philosophical, like as I was painting it, it was a real like, you know, um, trip trying to like kind of like unravel and unwrap the experience that I was having because it was something that it was so tremendously huge in my life. Um, and now I was completely repulsed by it. It was disgusting. When I was done with the painting, I had to throw them away because it was just gross. Um, and um, and it was just really, really weird. And it's funny because like that painting has been pretty popular. People really like it. Um, and they really connect with the title of nostalgia because a lot of people are like, oh, I remember I used to eat those cupcakes. I haven't had one in years. And, I used to do that. And, it's kind of like, it looks like it's on a picnic table or something. Um, and, um, and so I think it resonates with a lot of people because I think people, used to get those as kids or something. Um, and for me, it's a little bit the nostalgia is a little bit different. But uh, but it's definitely it's a weird it's from a weird time in my life, and it like my friends sometimes refer to me. They have a demarcation of they literally will like refer to different events as like old Andy and new Andy, um, because of, with reference to that is like the reference that they're talking about. And so it is kind of interesting that specific painting, but it seems to resonate with a lot of people, and I think that's really awesome, and I think that really always happy people see it and they say, "Oh, right, I remember that," and I'm like, "There we go." Things where I think everybody's got a story, I mean, I would assume that's partly why we're having this interview is because you know, you meet people at like an opening or something, and you get like a 30-second little mini conversation. But there's a lot more to everybody, I suppose. My creative journey is a little bit different than anybody else's, right? Everybody kind of takes their unique path. During the kind of the weekdays, I am a math professor. Originally, I didn't do any art, and I kind of took myself to not be a creative person. And it wasn't until my dog passed away, I was really, really heartbroken. And so I just did anything I could to stay out of the house. One of the things that I sort of fell into was the adult education program over at LACMA. They had classes all the time. It was like, well, maybe this is something, maybe I am a creative person, maybe I just don't know that. And so I took a lot of classes there, in the evenings, and they were a lot of wine moms, and I was kind of the only one that was the serious one that actually wanted to learn what was happening. And so I learned a lot of art history, and I learned a lot about the different techniques. And thing led to another, and then pretty soon, I was invited into a group show at a gallery, which blew my mind because I was like, that's for expert artists, that's for professional artists, it's not for somebody like me. And then it just like blossomed from there. And here I am talking to you about my art. And if you had told me that a few years ago, I would have been like, no, that's just getting interviewed for art is for famous people and big shots and professionals and people with MFAs. That's not for me. I think the art community in Los Angeles, um, is not a stuffy, elitist community, and a lot of it is just a matter of like finding out that it's possible as soon as I learned that it's for everybody, there's a gallery for everybody. Like you can, whatever you make, you can find somebody somewhere willing to show your work. It might not be, you're not going to get your work in Mocha or whatever, but you're going to be able to do something. You're going to be able to share your work somehow. Just like, okay, apply, just ask. And um, you don't get everything you want, but like you get a lot. You get a lot more than you think you will. So the first show I ever did during COVID, I had a gigantic pile of just random like stuff that needed to go out to the trash. I felt bad just throwing it away. So I was like, kind of like, I don't know, like inspired by this frustration. And I was like, I should make something of this. And what would be most fitted to make of this pile of garbage? I just had this epiphany, and I was just like, I'm just going to paint Pigpen um, from the Peanuts characters, and so I was at LACMA at one of the painting classes, standing next to a guy that I think I met like only in that class. I just shared the work that I was doing with the class, because I was used it kind of as an example of like, look, if you keep taking these classes, you can get better at painting, right? And and he followed me on Instagram, and I followed him back. And at one point, he shared something about a show at Shockbox in Hermosa. It was the perfect show. The show was called Regulated Garbage. And I was like, I happen to have a piece made out of garbage. I was like, this has got to be it. And I still was kind of in that mindset where like, this isn't for me. But then I was like, this seems like a wild show. This is like not stuffy. This is not elitist or anything like that. This is appears to be a regular, normal person gallery asking for like a really weird, quirky show. I was like, maybe this is for me. Like maybe I can do this. And I got it. I got accepted, and they really, really liked the piece. They said it was awesome. And so it was something else. I mean, I just like I couldn't believe it. And I was able to get all of my friends to come, to the opening and everything, and come see it. And it was just like totally crazy, because I was like, this is so foreign to me that something like this would be happening to me. And it was so much fun. Every time after that, I showed at Shockbox, I think like 6 times total, subsequently. And it was just so much fun after that to go and to watch other people have that same experience where that was their first show. And you get to see them have their mind be blown and then realize that they can do it. And it was just so much fun just to see that. I mean, I was in a painting show, or I was in a group show in Switzerland. So it was through LAAA, the LA Art Association, and connecting with a sister gallery in Switzerland, in Neuchâtel, Switzerland. The title of the show was The Soul of the City. When we went to Switzerland, that particular gallery has been around. It's like the building itself is like from the 1600s or something. They have had like the art of like Picasso, Paul Klee, and all these like famous artists. Not, of course, when I was there, but like, their paintings had been there in the past. So I'm like, when am I going to have an international show where my art is going to be on the same wall that Picasso's art has been on? I was like, I kind of need to see this, right? So I did decide to go. It ended up where it was almost like a solo show because I had my own room. It was just my art, and they really liked it. I was the only one that got its own room, and so work was like notably Los Angeles. Everyone else has had like the soul of the city kind of thing, but mine was Los Angeles. And so I didn't really know what to think as far as like what the Swiss people would um, kind of how they would take it. And like I said, like Los Angeles people see it, and I don't paint people, I don't paint the cars, I don't paint anything like that. I pretty much just take Los Angeles and I take all the people out of it. And so a lot of people, a lot Angelinos look at it and they think, oh, these are so lonely. This is like so, so weird. And I don't leave like litter or graffiti or anything like that. So then they all look like, this isn't like the way that we have it. Like it's not, it doesn't look right. People like feel weird about it. Um, I went to Switzerland and I was talking to some of these people and they had the opposite opinion about it. They looked at it and they were like, "Oh my God, these are so clean. Everything is so nice and the colors are so like vibrant. This is so happy. This is just like so terrific." And I'm just like, this is not what LA people think about this art. Like, I was like, this is like the very opposite. So it was a really interesting um, like learning experience about how like culture influences your eye and your your sensibilities and your interpretation of art. I mean, you can have whatever statement you're trying to make, and you send that to a different place, and your statement is interpreted in a vastly different way. Um, so when I came back, like that feeling of like imposter syndrome was gone. Like that was that. I was like, I am officially an artist and I know it.